So, welcome to our weekly live. If you're new to the Your Yoga Flow Facebook group, this is a weekly live development session that members of the faculty put on. Sometimes they're practices, yoga classes, meditations. Sometimes they are sort of diving deeper into certain aspects of the teacher training program or teacher training programs or of just in general teaching yoga. So our topic today is about your voice, the voice, a voice, and what that means in regards to teaching yoga. So what came up in a Q&A session a few weeks ago was someone asked a question about how we can I don't remember exactly, but I'll paraphrase, sort of how we can develop the ability to be able to teach and demo without getting breathless and without sort of losing our vocal power, which is a really good point because as people taking yoga classes, we're not having to speak. But as someone teaching, there's a mixture of basically, in some sort of sense, there's a 60-minute class. You're speaking for 60 minutes pretty much. There's obviously breaks in there, whilst also demoing the poses, maybe a lot of the poses, maybe not so many of the poses, but there's a mix of that. Also, you're cueing breath, you're cueing other things, so it can get quite complicated and it is normal to get out of breath. So, but there are things that we can do in regards to supporting our voice that can help us through that. The other reason why I thought this was a really good opportunity to talk about this is that our voice is probably one of the most important tools that we have as teachers. Visually demoing poses obviously is also really important, but the way that we communicate with students is really key, and it's a way that we can keep them safe, that we can create a space that feels supportive and guided. So like most things, using your voice to communicate in a public way, if you're not used to it, it's going to take some practice. I still get out of breath when I teach vinyasa or power classes because I'm not so used to sort of doing that. I teach more hatha, gentle hatha, restorative yin type practices, so it does take me a while if I'm starting a new power or vinyasa class to get into finding a rhythm, finding a balance between demoing and exerting myself and between using my voice to cue and guide my students. So just know that it's very normal if you find like, oh man, like teaching sun salutations, I just don't have enough breath to get words out. That's normal. Don't worry about it. It will come with time and practice. Even if you're used to public speaking, maybe you're already a teacher of some kind, even if that's you, this is a whole new world for some of us. We might be used to teaching other aspects, but when we add in the movement part, that starts to get a little tricky. So for many of us, these layers that we have in a yoga class, these requirements that are put up on us as teachers in combination can be a little tricky. So I thought today that I would share some exercises and some ideas about ways you can strengthen your vocal endurance. So we'll go over what that means, breath control, and projection. And those are sort of three key things that I think are really important to understand as someone who uses their voice, whether you're using it for speaking or singing, using your voice to communicate with people. And the other reason why this is really helpful is you're not always sure as a yoga teacher what sort of space you're going to walk into. You might walk into a very small space like the one I'm currently in, or you might find you're teaching in a community hall and all of a sudden you have to fill this huge space with your voice. And if you're only used to teaching in a very sort of small, intimate space, then how do we project our voice without feeling like we're yelling, without feeling like we're compromising the tone, the color, the quality of our voice, but how do we do that efficiently and effectively without hurting ourselves and without having to compromise the ambience of the class? So these are reasons why I think it's important to work through these things. And if you're new to your yoga flow, if you're working through the 200-hour course, there are 2 mini courses in the 300-hour program. There's Finding Your Voice with Angela, which is amazing. And then there's a chanting course with myself. And then there's a breathwork class. Actually, there's 3 with one, a pranayama course. And all of these 3 courses in the advanced teacher training would be really, really helpful as well. So if you're curious about learning more, there are further resources to explore. But let's dive in and talk about what those 3 things mean. So vocal endurance, breath control, and projection. So vocal endurance just refers to how long you're able to speak or sing before tiring, before your voice gets weak, before your voice gets kind of raspy, or before your voice gets sore. And when we're new to public speaking, when we're new to singing, and you'll keep hearing me refer to singing because that's more of my background and I'll default to that more than public speaking, but it applies for both. So how long you're able to do that. So for example, if you're a new yoga teacher and you're lucky enough to all of a sudden be subbing all over the place and you find that, wow, I have 4 classes in one day, that's going to ask a lot of your vocal endurance. It's going to ask a lot of the architecture and the structure of your body that is involved in producing sound. So how do we support that? And we'll get to that a little bit later on. Breath control is your ability to use your breath to have a healthy, full voice that supports a range of vocal colors and tones. Vocal colors and tones, just sort of in a, I guess, an ethereal sort of way, refers to the ability to change our voice. A lot of this just comes from intention. We do it without even thinking. For example, when we're teaching a meditation, our voice naturally gets a little softer. When we are trying to energize our students to move through some really challenging poses, naturally the voice probably takes on a little bit more sound, a little bit more depth, color, aliveness, and these are all sort of terms that are supported by breath control. So breath control, we can't do very much with our breath, with our voice, without having really good breath control. So, and then projection. So projection just refers to the volume of your voice, really the fullness of your voice, and how loud or quiet it is. One of the first things that I ever learned in singing was to not whisper, because whispering really puts a lot of pressure on the vocal cords and the vocal apparatus. So it was discovering ways to use the voice in a soft way without compromising the integrity of what's creating the sound. So vocal endurance, how long you're able to speak or sing for. Breath control, the ability to use your breath to support and to create a healthy, full voice with a range of tones and colors. And then projection is the volume of your voice, how loud or quiet it is. So when we're talking about vocal endurance, we are naturally made to make sound. This is a given. Being a human is that we can communicate these things. Vocal endurance just asks us to consider how long are we able to do this for without tiring. I know that for myself, teaching maybe 3 classes a day it asks a lot. By the last class, I'm getting a little bit tired. When I first started teaching yoga, I could remember being really sore in my voice right from after the first class. So you might just reflect on how long can I speak for or sing for before I start to get tired, before I start to feel like, oh yeah, I notice that my voice feels different after this. And then breath control, do I feel like I have difficulty catching my breath when I'm speaking or when I'm teaching? And do I have difficulty being quiet, like making sort of softer, gentler sounds with my voice? Do I feel like that's more work, or is it really hard to make my voice energized and to feel excited and to motivate my students? Something to think about. And then projection, do I get feedback sometimes that my students can't hear me? Or do I feel that I'm always yelling and that I just don't know how to make that sort of soft, gentle sound that I see and hear in other teachers? So these are important things. I would say out of all of these things for yoga teachers, we have a good idea of breath control because we practice pranayama, and speaking and singing are sort of like natural pranayama exercises. So we probably, this one's like a little bit more familiar. Projection can be difficult because unless and a lot of you are really lucky because you get the opportunity to record yourself and to watch back, which is uncomfortable as that might be, and it's really uncomfortable for me to do that for myself, is helpful because some of you might have noticed when you watch back your videos, you're like, oh, I can't really hear myself, or oh, there's not a lot of change in my vocal pattern. It just sort of feels a little, or sounds kind of the same throughout. And then the vocal endurance, you might just notice from your own experience of teaching your practicum classes and working through the material. So just a little bit of voice theory. Your voice is supported by your breath. So number one, if we're not breathing when we're teaching, if we are too busy concentrating on other things and we're not reminding ourselves of our breath, then our voice will begin to suffer, which is why breathing with your students is key. So learning to not only give the breath cues, but to take the breath cues yourself, regardless of whether you're in the poses or not. So breathe with your students. This also, just you breathing with your students reminds your students to breathe. So even if they don't hear the breath cue, you breathing not only benefits you, but it benefits your students. So full breaths are key for this. And the other thing you might want to maybe just consider is the time just before you start the class. So taking a few moments before you start the class for deep breathing, just to start to tap into what that feels like for you. I love to begin my public classes with pranayama, not only for my students, but it's also for me. It's the opportunity once they're in the pranayama practice is to practice my own deep breathing so that I'm fully connecting to the process of breathing and that I begin by setting a solid foundation of breath for what's about to happen. So those are just two things to mention. And then projection, projecting your voice, again, comes down to breath control. It comes down to really using your breath. And then it comes down to practice. And like I just said before, recording yourself, maybe playing with different colors in your voice, different ways of sort of using your voice to create an environment for your students. And a lot of this will just come with time, but it really does come down to practice. So, sure, Mark, you're telling us all of this stuff about how to use our voice, but then what do we do if we feel like we are a person who just has difficulty? We've never, oops, oh dear, my computer. We've never spoken in public before, or I just always feel tired and breathless, these kind of things. So one exercise that you can do, the best exercise you could do, and if you never do anything else besides this, it's amazing, it's going to help you a lot, is humming. Humming is foundational for voice work. Why it's good is, or why it's amazing, is because it's something that's quite private. So you're able to do it and it's not going to disturb your family. It's not going to disturb your pets. You can do it just before you teach to sort of warm up. And it's amazing for breath control. And it's an amazing preparation for chanting too. And it puts very little stress on your voice, but it requires a lot of breath control and support from the structure that supports your voice, the muscles of breathing. So I highly recommend humming. Now, it's not humming like we might be used to, which when I first, I don't know if I ever learned to hum as a kid, but when I discovered humming along with things, it was this really sort of like, you know, you're sort of really thinking about buzzing your nose or buzzing your lips, this kind of thing. The humming that I want to introduce you to is the humming that is sort of like there's a bee in the room. It's just very faint. I'm gonna demo it so that it doesn't seem so out there, so left field, but it's this humming that's sort of like this little insect in your room that's very quietly just buzzing around. And that's the sound that we want to play around with creating, because when we play with creating this sort of tiny buzzy humming sound, we start to tap into all the places in the body that create resonance, which is what makes our voice full and free and in some ways effortless. So we could sit. I was kneeling, but my legs started to tingle, so now I'm sitting cross-legged. So the most important thing is that you are lengthened in your upper body, so you could stand for this too. And then you just want to relax your shoulders, relax the back of your neck and the muscles around your eyes. And then I'm going to close my eyes for this because it's just easier. And relax your tongue, relax your jaw, but keep your lips together. And then we'll take a deep inhale. We're going to imagine we're humming at the back of our head. So it's a really different feeling. It's actually a really lovely, relaxed feeling. But it's just imagining that the sound is happening back here. So it's not this very nasal, sort of aggressive hum. It's a very gentle, ethereal type hum that's happening back here. So try again. So take a deep breath in. And then we're going to start to hum. And it doesn't matter what it sounds like. It's not important what it sounds like. What we're looking for is how does it feel? Does it feel like a nice, kind of relaxing, buzzy, sort of humming feeling? And then if that's what's happening, great. It's normal that it wavers a little bit because, as we just discussed earlier, we're tapping into breath control. So now we sort of know, okay, this is sort of the sound that we're looking for. This is the direction we're going in. Now we'll start to add in the muscles of breathing. So when you take your hands and place them on your ribs and then relax your shoulders, it's probably going to feel a little uncomfortable, but bear with me. So when we're breathing in, before we do this exercise again, let's take a second to feel this. We want to feel these side ribs expand out. So we're going to breathe in. So the side ribs are expanding out, and then we're just going to gently keep them sort of out as we exhale. We're going to resist them from collapsing in too quickly. So we're not going to force them out, but we're just going to feel expansion as long as we can while we're exhaling and humming. Okay, so what we have is we're going to hum back here. We're going to have the hands on the ribs, and we're just going to gently try and keep that feeling of spaciousness in the rib cage while we exhale. So we'll see what happens. So we'll take a deep breath in. And then we'll hum. So I don't know about you, but as soon as I tap into this feeling of just sort of gently resisting the collapse of the rib cage, I can hum for much longer, and it feels more sort of centered and solid. Like there's a core of sound that feels supported. And this is tapping into the idea of supporting our exhale, supporting our singing or our speaking voice. The reason why we're humming for so long is because when we're teaching, we likely are taking a big breath in, and then we're going to give a bunch of instructions and a bunch of directions, and they're probably going to be on one breath for a little bit, and then we'll take another breath. And then there's going to be a lot of things that we're saying about moving a foot here, lifting a leg up, moving an arm this way. And so the longer that we can sort of exhale and move sound out, that we can speak or sing, then the easier that's going to be. And then it has this lovely feeling like a pranayama, like we're taking a breath in, and then there's this beautiful long exhale, and there's all this information, blah, 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 blah. Breathe again, and then there's more. And that's why this type of exercise is really helpful, because it starts to develop this ability to control the voice, not in a restrictive way, but in a way that supports it. So that's the bee humming. And then what's really easy to do is to open it up to a vowel. So I'll show you what that might look like. So we'll put the hands on the ribs again. And just make sure your spine is nice and lengthened. And we'll take a deep breath in and feel the ribs move out. And then we'll hum. And we'll open it up to an ah. And that's it. All of a sudden we opened up the voice a little bit. Likely because we opened up the voice, there's more requirement of air. The exhale is going to be a little shorter, but the same principles apply of gently resisting an instant collapse of the rib cage. And you'll feel it slowly draw in, but it's a more relaxed, slow draw in. And then the voice supported by the breath, supported by the apparatus of breathing. So we'll try that one more time. So the hands on the rib cage. Your eyes relaxed, your tongue relaxed, tongue relaxed. And that's it. And this is a great way, a great sort of soft, gentle, kind way to begin to practice a few elements of voice, of a few sort of key fundamentals of using your voice. We're practicing breath control. We're practicing support of the voice. And even though we're singing, we're making sort of a more musical sound. All of these things will help support your speaking voice when you're in a class, and really help support your chanting if you're choosing to do a chant in your classes. So this is just two really easy ways to begin this process of practice. I have more, but we're going to run out of time, so I might have to do this a second time, another one in a few weeks. So the next thing to think about, so we've talked about, so we did breath control, and this also taps into our vocal endurance, so our ability to speak for long periods of time without tiring. And that's why using sort of the ribs and all of this sort of surrounding structure helps to support our voice, which helps with our vocal endurance. And then one other thing I'd love for you to think about before we end this today is, where do you speak from? So maybe you, like lots of us, will have never really considered this question before, but there are people who speak very high up, like they're sort of speaking from here, and the voice is like quite high up in the chest, And sometimes you even feel, I remember before I started singing and doing this kind of stuff years ago, I would sometimes feel like very tight in my neck and like a little like fast breaths, and then speaking again from up here and then doing it again, and it just feels like tense and tense and tense and tense. When I learned about speaking from low down in the body, it changed everything for me. And so I'd love for you just to close your eyes and to speak. You can just copy what I'm saying or say something else and sort of see if you can feel where, or imagine where in your body the sound is starting from, the very sort of the birthplace of sound in your body, where it feels like it begins. And I know that for me, I feel like it's just down below my belly button. And if I remember to speak from this place, it automatically creates a voice that feels more full and authentic. And when I forget, when I get anxious or stressed, I can feel the voice creeping up, so it gets even higher, and then I'm sort of here at my sternum, and that's kind of uncomfortable, and I don't breathe super great. And then I have to remind myself, okay, no, speak from low down, speak from below your belly button, and automatically my voice takes on a very different, grounded quality. And that's the quality that I want to communicate to my students, which is why where my voice starts in my body, where I feel the birthplace of my voice, is really important. Because imagine if I was trying to lead a meditation and I speak from up here and I'm trying to speak very quietly, but it's really tense and it's kind of difficult for me. But if I speak from low down, I can create a very soft sound, a very gentle sound that feels supportive and full at the same time. And then if we're moving into a more energized part of the class, from speaking from this same place, I can add a bit more volume, a bit more color, a bit more variety, and all of a sudden this takes on this more energized sound, and then I can pull it back again. And I can speak from down low, and I can begin to guide a meditation from that same place. Because speaking is really music. Speaking is just another form of music that's a little bit more staccato, it's a little bit more broken up, but the same principles apply. So if you've never asked yourself, where does my voice begin before, it's a really important question to think about, because it can impact a lot of what we do as yoga teachers. And your day-to-day speaking voice might be very different, just because of habits and conditioning and things like this from where you might teach your yoga classes from. And eventually those two might start to intersect and find maybe a happy medium, or maybe you lean one way more than the other. But when you can really start to understand where your voice is created from, it adds a quality of groundedness that I think yoga students are really attracted to. Because a high, tense, tight voice can be reflected in the energy of the class. So a grounded, stable, full voice adds that sort of warm quality to a class. And we all have different tones of our voice. So some voices are naturally really high and they're grounded and they're beautiful and it feels supportive, and others are very, very low. Like, that's not going to change, but it's where do I bring my voice from? And again, it has this beautiful sort of relationship where when you start to speak from sort of the true place of your voice, nice and full and deep and in a place in your body that feels supported, it just makes you relaxed, because you're able to breathe better, you're using your air fully, and then this has this amazing sort of feedback effect for the nervous system, for your mind, for your physical body. And that's why voice work is really, really helpful. So that's our half hour for the day. I hope that this is useful for some of you, and feel free to leave any comments if you have questions about this, because sometimes I get a little carried away and it gets a little all over the place, but this is something I'm really passionate about and I think can be such a helpful thing not just for your voice as a yoga teacher, but also for the quality of your mind and your health. So thank you for joining me today, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day. Bye.